This week on the College Football Roundup, the coaching carousel spins into overdrive, Michigan gets humiliated, the conference title games are set, and so much more. This is the Monday Report, starting now! Alright, hello everybody, it is Monday, December 1st, 2025, and this is the Monday Report. I'm your host, H. James K., and today we've got a lot to talk about. The coaching carousel has spun into overdrive. It is off the rails, gone insane, every other superlative you can think of. So we're going to talk about Lane Kiffin, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida, Auburn, Arkansas, contract extensions, some lower-level jobs that got filled. We're going to talk about some surprising ones. Then we're going to talk about which jobs remain open, possible candidates for those jobs. Then we'll move on to Michigan versus Ohio State. I got some thoughts about that one, believe you me. Then we'll talk quickly about all the conference title games. And I'll make some predictions, give you my thoughts on each matchup. And we'll get some quick hits, and then we'll get out of here. All right off the top. LSU is poaching Lane Kiffin from Ole Miss. This wasn't unexpected, but it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. That's what I'll say. Now, admittedly, Lane Kiffin is that woman. Everyone knows this woman. She's incredibly beautiful. She's exciting to be around. But this hoe ain't loyal. Yeah, she'll hang around with you for a couple of weeks, but then she's going to look for the next guy. And then the one after that. And then the one after that. And the one after that. Leaving a never-ending trail of emotional destruction in her wake. Yes, that's Lane Kiffin, ladies and gentlemen. He had a good thing going at Ole Miss. They're a bona fide playoff contender. And now he's leaving. And they're going to be coached by someone else. So he can take over at LSU with a 7-year, $100 million contract. So, I think this is despicable, to be honest with you. But it's not Lane's fault. It's the NCAA's fault. And I'll talk about that after all of the coaching stuff. That'll be the last thing I talk about before pivoting to other things. But he's just doing what the calendar allows him to do. What the calendar necessitates he do if he wants to be successful next season. So, I fully expect he's going to gut the Ole Miss staff. I fully expect he's going to take a handful of good players, like guys like Trinidad Chambliss, the quarterback, and a lot of their offensive pieces. That would not surprise me at all. Although that's just my conjecture. There's no bona fide anything behind that. So, don't take that as a rumor or anything. But having seen this play out before, Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma, USC, cough, cough. So, I fully expect that to happen. Now, here's the thing. Ole Miss may have stopped the bleeding. Yes, there's a bad leg wound and it's bleeding, but they got their hand on that wound and they're applying pressure and they're stemming the flow of blood. They haven't finished, they're not done bleeding, but it ain't gushing anymore. And by that I mean Ole Miss elevated defensive coordinator Pete Golding to head coach. They did this immediately. It was like, wake up, Lane Kiffin's the coach. 2 hours later, Pete Golding is the coach. So, from an Ole Miss perspective, you have to kind of talk about these two moves in conjunction. Hopefully, Pete Golding, who by all accounts is a well-liked individual, I don't think he's the greatest defensive coordinator in the world, but he's well-liked. And by just saying, we're not even going to do a search, he's the guy. Boom. Hopefully, he can get into the locker room and say, Lane Kiffin is betraying you. He's leaving all of you behind. He turned his back on you before the biggest games of your lives, which is why you should stay here at Ole Miss and tell that traitor to shove it. That's what he's going to do. That's what Pete Golding is going to do. And by all accounts, there was a players meeting. There was a meeting with the team in the locker room or in the team facility kind of after all this broke. And from what we're hearing, one player, a defensive lineman, I do believe, I do not know his name, sorry, he came out of that meeting shouting, it's time for the Pete Golding era, or something to that effect. So by all indications, maybe Pete Golding is going to be able to keep this team together ahead of their playoff run, and they're going to, to be able to kind of turn this on Lane Kiffin. Now back to Lane Kiffin. Kiffin wanted to coach out the rest of the Ole Miss season and then go to LSU. But you don't get to have it both ways. You don't get to chase glory with Ole Miss while everyone else knows that you're secretly giving googly eyes to LSU. You don't get to do both. You cheated on Ole Miss, dude. I mean, we keep making these parallels because you're looking at another school while you're the head coach at a successful program. But Lane Kiffin is Lane Kiffin. He's a social climber. He is one of these people who's always looking for the next job. And I guarantee you, mark my words, before his initial LSU contract is up, he's going to be going on to a different job. Maybe it's Georgia. Maybe it's Ohio State. Maybe it's the NFL again. Just mark my words. Before 2030, he will be on to another job, and he will leave LSU in the dust, just like he did Florida Atlantic, just like he did Ole Miss, just like he did Tennessee. I think it was Tennessee. It was either Tennessee to the Raiders or the Raiders from the Raiders to Tennessee. Either way, he left one of them burned. The point still stands. I think this is scumbag behavior. I think it's awful. But it's not surprising. All right, moving on from Lane Kiffin. Downstream from Lane Kiffin. So, Florida. Florida has a new head coach. They have hired Tulane coach John Sumrall on a 6-year contract paying out an average annual value of $7.5 million per year. So Florida is also hiring former Jacksonville Jaguars GM David Caldwell to be the GM for the Florida Gators. These two moves kind of come in conjunction with each other to, start a new era at Florida. And this is one of those moves where they fired Napier hoping to get hoping to get Kiffin, but then LSU fires Brian Kelly and jumps ahead of Florida in line for Kiffin, and Kiffin kind of fumbled the bag on that one. Billy Napier had to get fired, but by all accounts, this is kind of bad, and it's even worse than you actually think. So Summerall was originally in deep discussions with Auburn. Florida wasn't even his first choice, but rumors of an extension to Auburn defensive coordinator DJ Durkin before Summerall even had a chance to interview the man ultimately turned him off of Auburn and towards Florida. Now this is important because Summerall by his nature is a defensive guy. He's a defensive guy by trade. So with Auburn's trying to extend Durkin without giving Summerall any input, whether or not he even wanted to keep anyone on the current staff, he backed away from the whole thing and signed with Florida instead. Now, what does this mean generally? Well, Florida was not as attractive a job as Auburn, clearly, because the guy they ended up hiring was looking somewhere else first and only signed with Florida because the other school fucked it up, to be honest. Now, I am of the opinion that hiring defensive coaches goes one of two ways. Either they're completely dominant or they get fired. Because in this day of age, either a defensive-minded head coach either brings in a good offensive staff and the whole thing works, or he doesn't have a good offense and he gets fired in 4 years and they do the whole song and dance all over again. Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart, both defensive guys, hired great offensive staffs, very successful. But then you have guys like, man, I forget his name. He replaced Urban Meyer. He was the defensive coordinator. Wasn't great. By all accounts, he was horrible. You got Dave Aranda at Baylor. Massive failure. You've got Brent Venables, currently at Oklahoma. He isn't a failure, but things have been rocky in Norman because of his lack of an explosive offense with the Sooners. So this is either going to work, and he's going to hire a good staff and have an explosive offense and a good defense, or he's going to be yet another coach who's got a great defense and a shitty offense, and he gets fired because it's just not good enough, or some other BS line that they always give to the press. But I like the hire. Sumrall, I wanted Sumrall to LSU. I really did, because I thought he'd be a good hire for LSU, but by all accounts, what he's been able to do at Tulane is incredible, and I think he's going to be... I like the hire. I'm not going to say I think he's going to be good, but I like the hire for Florida. Back to Auburn, though. So, after Auburn totally screws up with Sumrall, they pivot to their second choice, Alex Galesh, who was the head coach at South Florida. And the interesting thing is, Alex Galesh and John Sumrall have the same agent. And there's no doubt that their agent would have told Galesh, hey, Florida totally did this stuff behind Sumrall's back. Probably shouldn't go there. And yet, Auburn hired Alex Galesh to be their new head coach. Now, maybe because Alex Galesh is an offensive-minded head coach, he doesn't quite mind Auburn extending DJ Durkin if they, in fact, try to do so. Either way, one would assume he went against the better judgment of his agent and signed with Auburn. So, by all accounts, Alex Galesh is a good coach. His South Florida squad, they play well. They play hard. They're a physical team. They execute well. What he was able to do with very limited resources is rather impressive. So, if he can take control of the Auburn program and kind of straighten out some of the things with the boosters and the administration, I think he can be very successful at Auburn. Now, after the string of failed head coach hires I've seen at Auburn since I was, born, I'm not super confident, but it could happen. Now, what's interesting, though, is Galesh was in deep contract discussions with Arkansas, but they couldn't agree on a contract, and then once Auburn whiffed on Sumrall, Auburn talked to Galesh and plucked him out of Arkansas's clutches. Now, continuing down the ripple effect, Arkansas hired Ryan Silverfield, the head coach of the Memphis Tigers, not the Memphis Grizzlies. That's a NBA team. The Memphis Tigers. Now, Ryan Silverfield to Arkansas. This is the least surprising hire I think I've ever seen. We were hearing talk about connecting Ryan Silverfield to Arkansas weeks ago. Like that. This is kind of always been a thing. Like this. It wasn't like, oh yeah, they're gonna hire him, but duh, it makes the most sense. It seems like the most logical hire. So Ryan Silverfield. Good coach. I know a lot less about him just because I don't pay attention to Memphis football. Then again, neither does anyone else. But I do know that his Memphis team gave several teams quite the scare earlier in this year. They play hard. They execute well. So hopefully he can turn Arkansas around. But it's the SEC. It's Arkansas. So who knows? I mean, honestly, you could say who knows. Because until we know the staffs these people are putting in place and what philosophy they're bringing in and how they do in the portal and recruiting, you really can't tell anything. People used to grade hires, but you really can't grade these hires until you know what staff they're bringing in. Because, Nick Saban could say, I'm coming out of retirement. But then if he hires Hingle McCringleberry and Jim Bob whatever that you've never heard of, and they're bad coaches, it might not matter how good of a head coach he is if his entire staff is a flaming dog turd. So, and we saw this with Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh's first offensive coordinator was Tim Drevno. And then they fired Tim Drevno because the offense wasn't working. And then they didn't have one, and it was just kind of offense by committee for a year. And then they hired Josh Gaddis, and he was supposed to bring his speed in space, and that was a massive failure at Michigan. And then they pivoted to elevating Sharon Moore. No, they brought in Matt Weiss to work with Josh Gaddis. And then Josh Gaddis left. And they retained Matt Weiss and brought in and elevated Sharon Moore from like offensive line coach to offensive coordinator, co-offensive coordinator, and O-line coach. And finally, the Michigan offense worked. Finally, they had the right staff in place for everything to work. And then Matt Weiss left, and Sharon just became the offensive coordinator, and the offense got even better. And it was like, finally, the stars are aligning. We got the players. We got the coaching staff. And on the defensive side, DJ Durkin was a great defensive coordinator hire in year one for Harbaugh. And then he left to go coach at Maryland. And Harbaugh went out and he got the sexy hire, Don Brown, Dr. Blitz as they called him. And that hire was a flaming disaster because Don Brown, his whole thing was, I'm going to sit in base defense with press man coverage and blitz until my shoes fall off every game, all game, no matter what. Even if they're gashing him with crossing routes and man beaters. So he got fired. And Harbaugh said, I've got to beat Ohio State. I've got to adapt. So he called his brother, John Harbaugh, and said, how do you stop offenses like Ohio State? You know, these high-flying vertical offenses. And he brought in Mike McDonald, a strategist, analyst, you know, one of those types from the Ravens organization. And he was the defensive coordinator, and suddenly it worked. And then he left to go to the Ravens, and Harbaugh brought Jesse Minter from the Ravens to Michigan. And the defense got even better. And he was like, finally, we got an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator and the head coach. So you got to have all these things at one point. So we really can't tell if Ryan Silverfield or John Sumrall or Lane Kiffin or Pete Golding or Alex Galesh, we can't really tell if any of these guys are going to be worth their salt until we know what staff they're bringing in. So kind of put a pin in those kind of things, you know? Now, elsewhere in college coaching news, Missouri head coach Eli Drinkwitz got an extension. He is going to be making $10.75 million through 2031. That's an ungodly huge amount of money, and yet he's not even close to the highest paid coach. No, sir, no, sir. He would have been 4 years ago. He would have been the all-time highest paid coach in the history of football, but not now. That's how crazy the coaching contracts have gotten. But this is great for Mizzou because it keeps a good coach in Mizzou, kind of preventing him from... Oh, and I almost forgot. The extension comes with a promise of more resources for revenue sharing, NIL, facilities, and the like to keep him in Mizzou so he can keep this thing going, because I genuinely believe Drinkwitz can win at Mizzou. I think he's got a solid foundation. They play good defense. They run the ball incredibly well. I do think he needs a better QB than Bo Pribula, but you can see what the vision is for Mizzou and Eli Drinkwitz, so I like that they extended him. Other news in extending coaches, Vanderbilt head coach Clark Lee ain't going anywhere. The Commodores gave him a 6-year extension. We don't know the money behind that yet, but once again, promises of expanded resources and coaching contracts and all of that stuff to keep him at Vanderbilt. More than even the Drinkwitz one, I think this is huge for Vandy, because in my lifetime, the only other coach who's had Vanderbilt even close to competitive was James Franklin, and he never even got close to what Clark Lee has done with the Vanderbilt Commodores. And yes, they had losing records in his first 3 seasons, but in the last 2 years, Clark Lee, now that he's got Diego Pavia as his QB, things have just catapulted into just best Vanderbilt has been since I've been alive. And I'm 29. I'm going to be 30 years old in like 2 months. So it's one of these things where if Vanderbilt let Clark Lee get away, it's the ultimate fumbling the bag kind of situation. So I love it. I love this hire. Now, that said, what's he going to do once Diego Pavia finally runs out of eligibility? Because Diego Pavia, I'm pretty sure, is a 6th-year senior, and he's probably going to try to sue to get a 7th. But at the end of the day, Diego Pavia is going. He's having a Heisman Trophy caliber season. He's going to be gone after this year. What does Clark Lee and Vanderbilt do at quarterback next? Because that's going to ultimately shape whether this extension was a brilliant thing or premature. I have faith that they'll be able to find a QB. Other hires, so Oregon State, who finished the year 2-10 and had fired Mike Gundy, they have a new head coach, or at least it is reported that they will have a new head coach once the playoffs are over for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And that is because they are hiring Jamarcus Shepard, the offensive coordinator / wide / coach / assistant head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, forgive me. I said Oklahoma State when I meant to say Oregon State hired Jamarcus Shepard. I have on my little write-up, I have Oregon State and Oklahoma State, one on top of the other, and I confused the two. That's on me. So Oregon State hired Jamarcus Shepard. And it's a 5-year deal. We do know that. It's a 5-year deal. By all accounts, he's bringing the assistant wide receivers coach, assistant running backs coach, and assistant O-line coach with him or something. He's taking a whole bunch of assistant position coaches and stuff to kind of build out his staff. And he's going to be a first-time head coach, younger guy. So it remains to be seen what this is going to look like, to be honest with you. But considering how dire Oregon State's situation is, yeah, this is a good hire for them. Because I don't know how much higher on the food chain you can go when you're a group of 5 team, so to speak. So I like it. I like it. Now talking about Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State went 2-10, fired Mike Gundy. I'm pretty sure Oregon State, they went 1-11 or 0-12 or 2-10. They were horrible. But Oklahoma State was just as bad. They went 2-10, fired Mike Gundy in the middle of the season. I had a whole separate episode about that one. They are hiring North Texas Mean Green head coach Eric Morris. Morris was 33-24 at North Texas, and he has an extensive network of connections in the coveted Texas high school recruiting space. So, Oklahoma State. I love this hire because Oklahoma State, there's no reason Oklahoma State should be so bad. This is a team I was so sure that once Oklahoma and Texas left the Big 12, that Oklahoma State would just rebound and dominate the conference. And instead, they have fallen off a damn cliff because Mike Gundy didn't want to play modern college football. So, I love this hire because North Texas has been beyond irrelevant. Since I've been a college football fan, going back 15, 20 years. So, I love this hire. He made North Texas into a team where we were having early discussions about the playoffs earlier in this year before they ultimately kind of fell off a bit. Either way, I love this hire. Gosh, my voice is shot to crap. I was yelling my head off at the Ohio State game, so I've kind of lost my voice. And talking for 24 and a half minutes straight, my voice is failing me, so I'm going to have to take more and more drinks of water. Either way, the show must go on because we keep on grinding at the Monday Report. So I like the hire of Eric Morris. I think he's going to do well at Oklahoma State. If anyone can rebuild them to even a moderately successful mid-tier Power 4 school, I think it's Eric Morris. I really like the hire. I'm kind of surprised other SEC schools didn't take a look at Eric Morris, but, that is what it is. All right, moving on to the ACC. Stanford, God, that's so weird to say. Stanford has a new head coach. So, general manager and former Stanford starting quarterback Andrew Luck has made a hire for the full-time head coach of the Stanford Cardinal. And that is current Washington Commanders quarterback coach Tavita Pritchard. Now, for those of you who don't know Tavita Pritchard, I don't blame you. I had never even heard of this guy until Sunday morning when I had to look him up. Tavita Pritchard played quarterback at Stanford in 2008. He was actually a teammate of Andrew Luck. He lost the starting job to Andrew Luck in 2009. They were on the team together, which means, yes, he is a younger guy. He's not that old. He's a very young guy. He's been all over the NFL, quarterback's coach, offensive assistant. So Stanford is getting him on the cheap. There's no denying that. I mean, goodness gracious. Stanford couldn't afford a big-tier head coach, but if there was anyone who was going to have enough love of Stanford to want to save the Stanford football program, it is Andrew Luck and Tavita Pritchard. So Andrew Luck obviously has great love for Stanford. He almost won a Heisman Trophy at Stanford. So he is doing his damnedest to revive the Stanford program to what it was under David Shaw in the glory years and what it was under Jim Harbaugh. And he is hoping that Tavita Pritchard, a coach that they can afford, that he can come to Stanford and revive things. So I'll be honest, I don't like this hire because we kind of saw this at UCLA where they hired a low-cost former player who loved the program, who was totally in over his head, and it was horrible, and the team bottomed out even worse than they were before. So who knows? Maybe Stanford made the right hire, and maybe they'll be firing him in 2 years and looking to do this all over again. I don't know. But Stanford has a new coach. Moving to the Big Ten, though, Michigan State shockingly fired head coach Jonathan Smith. I was very shocked that they fired him. I cannot begin to describe how I was like, what? My parents and I were, going to get a Christmas tree or whatever, and we're in the car, and I'm like, holy shit, Michigan State just fired Jonathan Smith. And we're all like, what? Because, he's been bad, and MSU has been bad, but this year, in this moment, now all of a sudden, so Jonathan Smith is out. He's 9. He was 9-15 in 2 years, and the biggest problem with Jonathan Smith, other than the lack of results, was the fact that he wasn't good. He's not an orator. He's not good. He wasn't good at communicating with the press, with fans. So, in year one, when he kind of undersold how important the Michigan State rivalry was, and then blundered his way to losing a game that, by all accounts, he should have won because Michigan's offense was so limited, but his coaching errors and sloppy play on the field totally doomed Michigan State and they lost the game. Those two kind of things, that the lack of communication and that result poisoned the well for a lot of fans, and the continued losing and getting worse, it was over. The party was over. So they fired him. And then not even 2 hours later, they hired a new head coach. Michigan State is hiring former Northwestern Wildcats linebacker and head coach Pat Fitzgerald. So I'm just going to say it. Michigan State has made the best hire of any team this coaching carousel cycle. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Bro, it's Pat Fitzgerald. Northwestern never won anything. Excuse me. As Lee Corso would say, not so fast, my friend. Pat Fitzgerald, his teams were never great. Oftentimes they weren't even good. But for a school like Northwestern, which isn't which isn't even a sports school, let alone a football school, for the fact that what he was able to do in certain years at Northwestern cannot be understated. Talk about doing more with less. The players he had at Northwestern, you're like, who? Talk about no facilities, no support, no good staff hiring capability, and yet that team was able to give most teams a real tough test. So, with Michigan State endeavoring to invest more in their football program, bringing in Pat Fitzgerald is brilliant. Master stroke move. I really love this hire. Now, you can't talk about Pat Fitzgerald without confronting the fact that he was fired by Northwestern, a place where he played, where he was hired by his head coach, elevated to head coach after his head coach retired, spent like 12 seasons there. 2 years ago, he was fired by Northwestern for a hazing scandal. And not just like, shoving nerd in the locker room. No, like bad, weird, creepy sex stuff kind of hazing scandal. And that was really bad. And like David Braun got elevated to the head coaching facility, head coaching job, like only because he was the only coach on the staff who wasn't involved. But, that being said, it has to be said that the school fired Pat Fitzgerald, even though their own investigation couldn't connect him to it definitively. He then sued Northwestern, and there was an undisclosed settlement with an undisclosed amount. So that was 2 years ago. And in the last 2 years, he has learned much about the world of college football, so he says. He has a clear vision about how revenue sharing isn't enough. That you have to have revenue sharing and NIL and recruiting, and you have to be able to really communicate with players on a really basic level about, finances and how their worth to the team, and, all of these things that have kind of evolved in the game. And he sounds, by all accounts, to have a very clear vision of what he wants his program to be, even though he hasn't technically had his opening press conference yet. So I love this hire. I still remember all the times that Northwestern would give Michigan a really tough time, even if we won. There was always games where like, ugh, God, I hate playing Northwestern. They're always so scrappy. So I love it. I think it's a great hire. I'm devastated that he has to coach for Michigan State, and I have to hate him now. So Michigan State, Pat Fitzgerald, well done. That's a good matchup. Now, which jobs are still open? Penn State, arguably the second or third best job in the entire country that is open. And yet we haven't heard anything. Bupkis. By all accounts, they have been interviewing everyone under the sun. They've been talking to everybody. But we haven't heard any movement on who their next head coach is going to be. So, I can't tell you who their next coach is going to be. But I can give you some guesses. I can throw out some names. So, right off the top, the name that really comes to mind is Brian Hartline, offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Throw a dump truck of money at this man. What he is able to do at coaching wide receivers and what he has done to this Ohio State offense, trust me, I saw that offense in person on Saturday. They are the real deal. Yes, Penn State should hire this man. They should obviously say, here's a check. You write down a dollar amount and we'll figure it out. Yes, do that. Because he is the top of the line, S-tier, must-have-it candidate. He's been at Ohio State forever. He played for Ohio State. He's coached there forever. He knows the Midwest. He understands the Big Ten. He'd be great. It'd be just plain and simple. I think he'd be a great hire. Just there's nothing else other than the fact that I think he'd be a great hire. So they should hire him. Now. Do I think it's going to happen? Absolutely not. I think he's going to stay at Ohio State until the heat death of the known universe, or Ryan Day leaves for the NFL, or Ryan Day retires in 20 years and he becomes the head coach. I think he's just going to stay. He loves Ohio State. He's got a great thing going. He's making a lot of money. Yeah, I think he's going to stay. Failing that, other head coaching candidates to consider are Bob Chesney, the head coach of James Madison. I know, not a super sexy name, but he's succeeding Curt Cignetti at James Madison, and he even though Coach Sig really gutted the James Madison roster when he went to Indiana, Chesney has been able to ensure that program isn't going anywhere. So that is so there's something to be said about that. He recruits the New England Northeast area really, really well, which kind of is a big deal for Penn State. And he by all accounts, he's a good coach. He's one of these guys who is just a solid coach. Now, hiring him after firing James Franklin is a real decision. Like, that's a get you fired as the athletic director kind of decision if he turns out to be a major flop, because you had Mr. 10 wins a year automatic James Franklin. And if you fire him and get a guy who can win no more than 5 games and your program bottoms out for 3 years, yeah, it's going to be a freaking problem. So that there's a real risk reward there, where either he's the next Curt Cignetti, or you've hired a really bad coach and you're getting a new athletic director who's hiring a new head coach. So it's an option. A really out there one is Brian Daboll. Yes, the former New York Giants head coach, coached with Saban at Alabama, Brian Daboll. Yes. I know it's kind of out of left field, but he, as we've heard, Saban swears up and down that Brian Daboll would be a good coach. He has coached at college before. When he was in college, he was reported to be an absolutely incredible recruiter. So if you wanted to make a lot of noise and we're bringing an NFL coach to coach at Penn State, yeah, you hire Brian Daboll, because he sure as shit ain't employed right now. The Giants fired him, even though I liked Brian Daboll at the Giants, to be honest with you. I don't think he was really the problem. I think their GM is the problem and their ownership. But Brian Daboll, he's not my number one choice, but I think he's definitely a guy who should be called, just because I think he would be able to make a lot of noise. So, yeah, I coached. I'm the one who helped mold Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, and I have all this extensive experience coaching professionals, and I know what it takes to get you in the NFL and all of those kind of lines. So, Brian Daboll. Now, this fourth one isn't a guy who really has been coming up in these conversations about the Penn State job, but he's the one I think Penn State should hire. Glenn Schumann, the defensive coordinator of the Georgia Bulldogs. I think this would be a slam dunk, because that defense at Georgia is nasty. And it's a defense that has gone toe-to-toe with Ohio State and other S-tier programs all the time. And that's what Penn State needs. They need someone who can bring a killer instinct and a championship mentality to Penn State, because, to be fair, that's been missing from Penn State for probably 35 years. Even the final years of Joe Pa, it wasn't the same. It wasn't the championship or bust mentality, and especially under Bill O'Brien and James Franklin, that just wasn't even on the radar until very recently. So bring someone who knows how to win a national championship, who's been a part of numerous national championship teams at Georgia. Yeah, Glenn Schumann. That's the one. That's my number one choice if I was Penn State, is Glenn Schumann. Another job that is still open is UCLA. And by all accounts, Bob Chesney is the far and away lead candidate for the Bruins head coaching job. Now, going from the New England area to California, that's a kind of a big jump. Does he really match the culture of UCLA and, the greater Los Angeles area and all that? That remains to be seen. But, I think that would be a slam dunk hire, because I think he'd be pretty cheap. And for UCLA, you need someone who can get in there and build a program with few resources, because, You're not going to be able to match Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State. You're not going to be able to match those kind of teams for resources. So, yeah, it's a thing. So I would like that hire. Now, we haven't heard a damn thing from UCLA about their hire, so it remains to be seen if their administration is willing to kind of bite that bullet and take that risk, but, who knows. Moving on from the coaching carousel after 40 minutes, I thought that was going to be a 20-minute segment, and here we are, it's 40 and a half minutes later. All right, now, sadly, we got to talk about the Michigan-Ohio State game. Ugh. So, Ohio State completely obliterated, humiliated, demoralized, embarrassed Michigan 27-9. And the score wasn't even that close. Michigan was never in it. Michigan got the ball first, went down the field, kicked a field goal. Then turned over Julian Sayin on early, like 3 plays into the Ohio State first drive, and kicked another damn field goal. And then Ohio State got a touchdown, and then they got a field goal. And then Michigan ended up kicking another field goal, their third, and that was the end of the points. And they were held scoreless in the second half, and they lost 27-9. So Julian Sayin, Ohio State's quarterback, the sophomore, mind you, he went 19 of 23 for 233 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. I was there, guys. As much as I've been banging the Fernando Mendoza Heisman drum, Julian Sayin, he's incredibly accurate. He picked Michigan's defense apart like a damn brain surgeon. It was, some of the throws he was making, you're like, damn, that is just, woo, And he made one mistake the entire game. One. He made a pick on his second throw of the game, 3rd play overall for the Ohio State offense, and after that, he was damn efficient. He is so good. So Julian Sayin, he should win the Heisman. I've seen him in person. He's incredible. He's the most efficient quarterback I've seen at Ohio State ever. He's ridiculous. Michigan, on the other hand, Bryce Underwood, 8 of 18, 62 yards, 1 interception, 6 carries for 1 yard. What's the point of paying all this money and bringing in this hotshot QB if you're not going to call pass plays? I'll get to Michigan's game plan later, but it is so clear and obvious that Bryce Underwood was not prepared to play against Ohio State. And you know what? I can't blame him. He's a true freshman, and by all accounts, Matt Patricia's defense is one of the greatest ever in college football and incredibly complicated. But Michigan's outright refusal to throw the ball downfield at all was coaching malpractice. It was unforgivable. Bryce Underwood should have had 25 throws minimum. And if you're calling a lot of RPOs and he's just handing the ball off a lot, then you need to call actual pass plays and say, Bryce, throw the fucking ball downfield. Because all we saw all day was take snap, look at the pass rush, ditch the clean pocket, throw a ball to the running back. That's all Michigan's passing game was, for 62 yards. If we wanted that, we could have just played Davis Warren. What's all the money for? But I don't blame Bryce Underwood. I don't. He's a true freshman. What can you expect? I blame the coaches. You have to get in prepared. You can't come out that flat. Period. Michigan had negative yards rushing in the second half. Michigan, the 12th best team in rushing in the country, had negative rushing yards in the second half. Michigan was held without a touchdown for the first time since the 16th of September 2014, when Brady Hoke's final Michigan squad got blanked by Notre Dame 31-0. And I'll tell you, that Michigan squad that year was abysmal. That team was so bad, Michigan lost their 100,000 in the stadium record going back to the 70s. Now, they claim that record still stands to this day, but having been at that Minnesota game in 2014, there was not 100,000 people in the stands. That's how bad this Michigan team was in 2014. That got blanked by Notre Dame. Every Michigan team, every game since then has scored at least a touchdown in a game. That's every single game Harbaugh coached. Every single one. And everyone that Sharon coached until now had scored at least a touchdown in the game. But no more. And why? Ohio State was better. In every way, every phase of the they beat Michigan in every phase of the game for the entirety of the game. They dominated the trenches offensively, especially offensively. They were running the ball so well. They had 186 yards rushing. And their pass rush was just relentless. Their linebackers are crazy. Their safeties were just like glue. They outcoached Michigan. They out-executed Michigan. Effort, composure, everything you can think of. Yes, they were better than Michigan. And that comes down to coaching. And I know injuries were a thing. And youth was a thing. But at the same time, you have to come up with a game plan that isn't just, we're going to turtle and run the same 5 run plays and throw the ball 5 times in the first half. 5 fucking times in the first half is unacceptable. You should have had 14 attempts per half, minimum. But injuries did play a huge part. Justice Haynes' loss cannot be understated. Michigan with Justice Haynes at the running back position was, in my opinion, the most incredible rushing team of the season. Jordan Marshall tried to go, but it was clear that he wasn't healthy, and he was avoiding contact like the damn plague. Now, the runs he did have were efficient, but it was clear that he wasn't healthy, and he just couldn't go after the first quarter. The loss of Max Bredesen the week before can't be understated. How many times did we see Michigan try to do that kind of dive inside fullback block thing with the running back? Couldn't do it at all. Injuries to both of the offensive tackle positions this year really hurt Michigan's offensive line. But it isn't about the injuries. It's about preparation. And it's about composure. Because Michigan embarrassed themselves. Michigan's players refused to leave the field because they were going to defend their M from Ohio State planting a flag. That is so fucking soft. Oh my God. It got to the point where Ryan Day came up to Sharon Moore and said, we got to get your guys out of here. My guys aren't going to be planting any flags, so your guys need to get out of here. You know, Ohio State was determined to win with humility, and they damn did. And Michigan looked like petty, immature children. Michigan players were flopping all game. Anytime something happened, they were exaggerating to draw a penalty. It's like, no, don't do that. Just try to execute better. Instead of getting your ass blown up by their O-line and then bitching about it to the ref and headbutting the ref. Jay-Sean Barham. Way to lose your composure, bro. How did you not get ejected? And just classless, immature, embarrassing. What happened? It's like the Jim Harbaugh era is dead. It's over. Yeah, Michigan is no longer an elite program. It's done. We're done. Welcome back to Brady Hoke 2.0. We're right back into losing your composure when things get tough against Ohio State. Bitching to the refs because you're not getting calls that are going your way. Being afraid of the Buckeyes, even though you can hang with these guys. I saw Michigan stuff their ass on the 1 yard line 7 times. I mean, what more can you ask for? So, It all comes down to coaching. Michigan got embarrassed by every quality opponent they played this year, and several that were not quality opponents. Purdue almost beat Michigan. Northwestern should have blown Michigan out this year. Wisconsin gave Michigan trouble. That's coaching. The two games where Michigan was the most explosive were the two games where Sherrone Moore wasn't on the sideline. Now, maybe Sherrone Moore is just a conservative coach by his nature. Whatever the reason is, they play scared when he's on the sideline. Now, I'm not saying Michigan should fire Sherrone Moore. Not this year. Not this year. But if Michigan doesn't make the playoffs next year, here's what I'm going to say. Even if Michigan beats Ohio State in 2026, if Michigan doesn't make the playoffs, they should fire Sherrone Moore. Because to me, making the playoffs is more of a sign of progress for your program than beating Ohio State. Because yes, beating Ohio State makes you feel good, but if you can't actually get to the playoffs, then you're not an elite program. And that's what Michigan needs to be. So if Michigan isn't playing in the playoffs in 2026, he should be fired. Even if he beats Ohio State by 1,000, you still have to fire him. Because if you beat them and it didn't get you in the playoffs, that means your team was a failure elsewhere in the season. Because if you beat Ohio State and go to the playoffs, then okay, you're elite. Clearly you were elite. If you beat Ohio State and you didn't make the playoffs, then obviously you were like 8-4 or 9-3, and you weren't good enough. You weren't coached well enough. So yeah, 10 wins, playoffs. TikTok Sherrone, because Bryce Underwood didn't develop nearly as much as he needed to, and the roster construction for the second year in a row was not what it needed to be. You can't just ride with what you have when your position group is deficient. You know? We'll be fine at wide receiver. No, you won't. They weren't as horrible as last year, but they were not good. And against Ohio State, where was Andrew Marsh? Oh, yeah, he was out there, but he wasn't getting thrown to. He wasn't getting schemed open. He was just sitting there, blanketed, ignored. What's the point? So, yeah. Playoffs or bust next year. And you know, even if you lose in the damn playoffs, you have to make the playoffs. You got to go. Michigan's got to win 10 games and go to the playoffs. It has to be. That has to happen. I refuse to accept Michigan sliding back into the Brady Hoke, Rich Rodriguez mediocrity. No. Michigan cannot do that. We have seen the University of Michigan make good hires. Dusty May has Michigan basketball turned into the best team in the nation. He's been there 2 years. This is his second season. So, Sherrone, you're not listening. But if you don't go to the playoffs next year, you're out. Because this team is too talented. They recruit too well to be this poorly coached. It's unacceptable. And that falls squarely on the coach. I'm tired of hearing, well, we just got to execute better. And we just got to keep the main thing. And we just got to learn from this. Screw you. Tell me what you really think. Stop giving me canned coach speak lines without telling me anything. Oh, he's working through some things. Oh, we got to get better. We'll learn from this. We just didn't execute. We just weren't prepared. I'm done with it. Get to the damn playoffs. This is Michigan, for God's sakes. We are supposed to be contending for the Big Ten title every year, rain or shine, no matter what. We are supposed to be in that conversation. If the standard isn't the standard, then what the hell are you doing here? So, either win and get in, or pack your bags and get out, because I ain't got time for it anymore. That was fucking humiliating. I mean, it wasn't even that Michigan teams under Rich Rodriguez were more composed against Ohio State than that. It was like the second Michigan learned that they couldn't stop the Ohio State run game in the second half, they just stopped playing. As soon as they realized they weren't going to get those bullshit calls, they stopped playing. They walked on the field for the first time and realized, oh God, that's the Ohio State defense out there. I'm afraid. Stopped playing. That's coaching. So either shape up and fly right or get the hell out. so we can get someone else in here who can actually coach Bryce Underwood before we squander the most physically gifted QB in the history of Michigan football. This kid should be fucking Cam Newton. He should be Josh Allen. Tim Tebow when he was at Florida. This kid should be dominating. And he looked scared as hell. Undisciplined, bad throwing motion, bad mechanics, ignoring open throws. It was the same stuff from week 1. You try to convince yourself during that 4-game win streak that, yeah, Michigan is getting in the right direction. Bryce Underwood is really developing. And then you watch them against a good team and you're like, we're not really developing that much. That's coaching. So get it together, guys, because that was embarrassing. All right, moving on to things that admittedly the Michigan fan in me doesn't care about, but the professional in me is like, yes, we got to pay attention to these things. Conference title games. Michigan's out of it. My Lions are basically out of it. Worst Thanksgiving. It felt like it was 2017, Not a great Thanksgiving weekend. So the Big Ten title game is going to be Indiana versus Ohio State. Ohio State is obviously favored. They're favored by 5.5 over Indiana. Here is where we see if Indiana is, if they're made of something. This is when we see if the Hoosiers are a real team or if they're a paper tiger again. Because this Ohio State team is real good. And if they beat Ohio State, then, yeah, in Indiana they are like that. Ultimately, though, I'm predicting that Ohio State is going to win 38-21. I think they're going to dog walk the Hoosiers, go to the playoffs, and never look back. Next up, we got the SEC championship game. So Alabama is taking on the Georgia Bulldogs in Atlanta once again. So I initially thought this was going to be Alabama versus Texas A&M, but then the Aggies lost to Texas on Friday, and, well, Georgia beat Georgia Tech, and they were in. So, and Alabama beat Auburn, and that was that. So, once again, so it has to be said, Bama has won 10 of the last 11 games that they've played against Georgia. They're 10-1 in their last 11. But Georgia is favored by 1.5 points, meaning the game is a veritable toss-up. To be honest with you, I think Bama's going to win. Georgia is going to make some inexplicable mistake that they never make, and Bama's going to capitalize, and they're going to win 31-28. I think it's just going to be one of those things where it's their bugaboo. They just can't beat Bama. And I think it'll be a great game, though. It's going to be physical as hell, but I think Bama's going to win. Next up, we've got the Big 12 championship game, and in a surprise to absolutely no one, the Texas Tech Red Raiders are taking on the Brigham Young University Cougars. And this is a rematch of a game that was held earlier this year that Texas Tech won 29-7. That game was supposed to be like a big deal, and then it wasn't. The opening line is Texas Tech by 11.5 points. And I think that sounds about right, to be honest with you. Texas Tech is the far and away better team. BYU is good, but they're not elite. And I think this Texas Tech team is just really good. They got a great offense. They got that one linebacker is just so something else. I think his name is like Rodriguez. Jacob Rodriguez. He's so good. So I am predicting that Texas A&M is going to win this game 28-13. It's not going to be as bad as the last one, but it ain't going to be good either way. Knock my mic a little bit. Next up, we got the ACC title game. So the Duke Blue Devils are taking on the Virginia Cavaliers. This is the second time that both of these teams have ever gone to the ACC championship game. Ironically enough, both of these teams got absolutely obliterated in their matchups because Clemson, I think it was Clemson, absolutely blasted Virginia like 63-17 or something, and Duke got obliterated by Florida State with when Jameis Winston was there back in 2013. So one of them is going to walk away without getting blasted finally, which is going to be nice for one of these teams. Duke is 7-5. It has to be said, and if they beat Virginia, there is every possibility that the ACC doesn't even get into the playoffs. I thought it was a guaranteed spot for the four highest conference champions from the ACC and like the one guaranteed from the group of 5 or whatever. But I guess there is some leeway if your conference champion is just that bad. So, if Duke wins, ACC may not even get in. But if they did that, they would have to give that conference championship slot to another group of 5 team. They would have to take Tulane and James Madison or something, which I just don't believe for a second would happen. Now, would Duke be the 12th seed of 12 teams? Probably. But I think that entire conversation is just going to be needless drama because Virginia's going to win this game. Virginia dismantled them by 30 points the last time. I think they're going to win 24-14. It's going to be a closer game because high stakes championship games usually are, but I think Virginia's going to win this one and they're going to punch their ticket. And Tony Elliott is going to punch the ticket with Virginia and they're going to go to the playoffs and get blown out by someone better than them. Now, because we have no fucking idea who the group of 5 representative is going to be, I'm going to talk about 2 different conference championship games because I don't know which of these 2 teams are going to make it. Now, there is all possibility that Tulane and James Madison are the two contenders. So first, we got to talk about the game Tulane is playing. They're playing in the American Athletic Conference Championship game. So they're playing against the North Texas Mean Green. And shockingly enough, North Texas is favored by 3 points over number 24 Tulane. I don't know what to make of that, to be honest with you. My prediction was Tulane winning by 35-17. It's 35-17, but I guess Vegas disagrees with me because they think North Texas is going to win, which would be stunning. That would be crazy. I think Tulane's going to win because their coach, John Summerall, is leaving for Florida, but he's going to coach the rest of the season. So he's going to coach the conference title game and the playoffs if they make it. So, yawned all of a sudden. I apologize. Yeah, I think they're gonna. It's gonna be kind of a unite around the flag kind of moment where they're gonna really unite around their coach and win one for John before he leaves kind of thing, and they'll beat Tulane and go to the playoffs and get obliterated by Ole Miss or something. The other group of 5 game we got to talk about though was the Sun Belt Championship. Now, the playoff committee gives no love to James Madison, even though James Madison is 11-1 this year, and they've beaten the crap out of basically everyone they've played except for Louisville, who showed them the what for and the how now and all that. So they're playing. James Madison is playing the Troy Trojans. And James Madison is favored by 21.5. Yeah. So I am predicting that James Madison is going to win, but I'm not predicting that they're going to cover. I think they're going to win 31-13. So now the question is, say Tulane loses to North Texas. North Texas ain't going to the playoffs. It ain't happening. James Madison, say they win that game by 50 over Troy. Do they go? Someone's got to go from the group of 5. So if I'm James Madison, I'm going to pummel Troy. I'm going to say, even if we're up by 50 points. We're keeping the ones in until we've won by 70, just to make a damn statement. Yeah, I think James Madison's going to win. They're going to win, maybe go to the playoffs, lose to a better team, and then watch their head coach go join another team and get a Power 5 job. Now it's time for quick hits. So Alabama won the Iron Bowl over Auburn 27-20. This was a shockingly close game. I thought they were going to dog walk Auburn. Part of me did, at least. But yeah, it was 27-20. Further evidence to throw out the records and just kind of. But Ty Simpson didn't play great in this game. That was kind of a big thing. But Auburn managed to keep it close. They didn't win. Shocking, I know. But once again, there was chaos and anarchy. Texas defeated Texas A&M 27-17. This game was shocking to me because I genuinely believed Texas A&M was going to win this game easily. But that Texas defense, they turned over Marcel Reed twice, and Texas A&M just didn't get the run game going, and their defense just kind of failed them. And Arch Manning looked really good. He looked awful. God, what am I from Boston? He looked awful from early in the year, but as the year has gone on, he's really developed, and he looked really sharp in this last 3 games of the season. So now Texas has a very outside argument to get in if some shenanigans happen. But if Duke wins over Virginia, I think Texas goes to the playoffs. But I just don't think that's very likely. But Georgia, moving on. Georgia defeated Georgia Tech 16-9. Ugly game, boring game, low scoring, very physical, lots of defense, running the ball. But Georgia Tech they couldn't. Brent Pry and them, they couldn't get it going. As I suspected, Haynes King was held in check. He didn't get the rushing yards and the production he needed to win, to do all that kind of thing. So Georgia was able to win. They were able to control the game rather easily. So not much to it other than that. I mean, it was boring. It was hard to watch this game. It was just ugh. And lastly, Oklahoma survives against LSU. LSU led this game for a while, but Oklahoma finally won 17-13 in yet another game that Oklahoma should have blown someone out and didn't. So, just ugly. John Mateer is not an elite quarterback. He's hurt, and he's been playing. He had 2 more picks, I think against LSU. He just played bad. More of the same from the middle of the season. If you've watched Oklahoma, you know what I'm talking about. And usually this is when we'd say, what's next? And I'd go over all these different matchups to look forward to next week. But all those matchups are done. So, I mean, I could talk about Army-Navy, but I just don't care about the Army-Navy game. Sorry, not sorry. And I've already talked about all the conference championship games. So instead, we're going to look ahead to what bowl matchup Michigan's going to get. I know, so exciting. It's looking like Michigan's going to be going to the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl in Orlando, Florida, which is December 31st. I guess the Citrus Bowl really wants Michigan, really badly. So, yeah. What to say about this game? I mean, it's just so much apathy for this game. It's like, eh. The opponents for the game looks to either be Vanderbilt, Texas, or maybe Tennessee, depending on what the Citrus Bowl is feeling like. Personally, I would love for Michigan to play Vanderbilt, just because I think that'd be such an interesting game of styles where both teams really love to run the ball and play defense, and I think that game could be a really low-scoring, physical, kind of grinded-out, slugging match kind of game. But in all likelihood, it's going to be Texas, and Texas is going to beat the tar out of Michigan. That old chestnut. But, Citrus Bowl, it looks like. Now, maybe they go to the ReliaQuest Bowl again, but I doubt it. I think it's going to be the Citrus Bowl against Texas, but hopefully Vanderbilt. All right, so that's, an hour and 10 minutes again. That's crazy. For those of you listening on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and everywhere else that podcasts are available, thank you. Tell your friends and family about the podcast. Subscribe if you can. Leave a like if you can. Leave a review if you can. Help spread the word and tell me what you think. For those of you watching on YouTube, thank you. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you get notified of every up-and-coming episode. Leave a comment to help feed the algorithm. Tell your friends and family about the channel. Share it on social media. Spread the word so we can reach more people and build this community, which isn't much of a community right now, but it can be if we're persistent. All right. My name is H. James K. Thank you all for tuning in. Until next time.